Will fear stop you from not knowing exactly what you're getting into? This is the topic that we are going to dive straight into the center of the fire together and explore on today's Man on Fire podcast. Welcome. I am your host and the creator of Man on Fire, David Naylor. So my question for you guys is simple. Do you like certainty or do you like uncertainty? These are two of the 6 human needs, and we will dive into these human needs in a future podcast. But for the most part, the first 4 human needs are needs of your personality. The last 2 are needs of your soul. But no matter what, we are going to meet these needs. The question is, which ones do you value more? And I'll tell you that as little kids, as toddlers and as teenagers and even into our young adulthood, for men, most of us loved variety. Most of us loved the uncertainty. Most of us didn't need to know what was going to be happening. We had no problem diving right into the center of the fire with the excitement of the unknown. But as we age, that all changes, which we'll get into in a little while in this podcast. So I remember when I was a kid, I watched one of my favorite shows was the Little Rascals. And I'll never forget this episode where they were in this runaway contraption going down a golf course, God knows how fast. And one of the kids yells out to Stymie. He says, "Hey, Stymie, where are we going?" And I'll never forget Stymie's response. He goes, "I don't know, but we're on our way." And that's the epitome of just there is no certainty. I have no idea how this is going to play out. We might go flying, we might go crashing, we might get hurt. But he was just "I don't know, but we're on our way." This is so classic for that age of just doing things where you don't think about the consequences, diving into the passion and the variety of the uncertainty, which brings all this excitement into your world. I remember the movie with Ben Affleck and Jeremy Renner. There's a famous line in that movie where Ben comes up to Jeremy and he's like, "I need your help. I can't tell you what it is. You can never ask me about it later, but we're going to hurt some people." And Jeremy Renner takes a few seconds to think about it. And his famous response is, "Whose car are we going to take?" And that is exactly what it's like at that age when you're still young. You're not thinking about consequences. You don't have as high of a need or desire to have certainty, which is all about control in your life. And you're diving right into the center of the excitement. And you're going to see where I'm going with this in a moment, guys. And I had a very almost identical paralleling story in my life when I was about 23 years old, and this was way before that movie. So it's classic that they had a scene like that, because I remember a buddy of mine, Jimmy. So I was maybe about 19, and I'm home on one of the breaks, and I even had one of my buddies over from college, Pat, and Jimmy calls me up. He's like, "There's this guy. He's been bullying my younger sister, and I want to put a scare into him, and I need your help." And, rather than me asking a whole bunch of questions like, "Where are we going? What time do you need me to meet you there? What does this guy look like? Is he strong? Are we going to have to fight this guy?" None of that came into my head. He's just like, "I need your help." And he tells me where to meet him. And I, very similar to that movie, said, "All right, whose car are we going to take?" He's like, "Take your car." Next thing you know, Pat and I we meet Jimmy to put a scare into this guy. I'm not going to tell you the rest of the story. We could save that for another podcast. It was a crazy night. We'll leave it at that. Point of the story is that at that age, or at certain ages in a man's development, we don't really need a lot of certainty. We don't need a lot of control. We're more into excitement. We're less thinking about consequences. And when we're diving into things that would bring us passion, bring us excitement, help us feel alive. And then, of course, what ends up happening is you start to get older. And as you start to get older, you start to take on greater levels of responsibility as a man. All of a sudden, this word that was so elusive to you when you were younger starts to sneak its way in, and the word is called fear. And now all of a sudden you have a mind where you think about the optimal ways to handle things. See, at a younger age, you're all about breaking the rules, and you're not really worried about the law and worried about getting in trouble. You're just more into the excitement. But then you start to get older, you start to develop this part of your brain that's the optimizer, that likes to handle things efficiently, likes to weigh out the pros and the cons, and likes to look at it from what's the best way to handle this, and you consider consequences. And so little by little, as we age as men, we have this thing called fear start to sneak into our lives, and fear gets us to value control and certainty, because if I have more control, then I could minimize the amount of pain that's going to come my way. Whereas with variety, which is the spice of life, it's all about passion, and you're not really focused on fear. So for many of you, you have heard certain acronyms for the word fear. You've heard things like false evidence appearing real, or you've heard things like F everything and run. And for many of you that have gone to some transformational seminars, perhaps you heard things like, well, no, fear really stands for face everything and rise, because this is what you want to do in the face of fear. You want to be able to conquer it. You want to be able to overcome it. You want to be able to grab it and move with it and dance with it and not let it take over your life. But so many of us, as we go through this transition of going from irresponsible and borderline reckless, and we're not really accountable to other people other than ourselves, or maybe getting in trouble with our parents. Next thing you know, you've graduated college, you have a job, you get engaged, maybe you're married, you have some kids, and all of a sudden fear is primary because there are consequences, and you're accountable to other people, and you want to be responsible to other people. And little by little by little, this reckless little toddler, this kid that would go down this crazy contraption on a golf course, or when his buddy says, hey, we need to put in a scare into a person, or when Ben Affleck says to Jeremy Renner, hey, I need you to come with me, I'm not going to tell you anything about it, and he's like, yeah, no problem. Now here we are as an adult, and we are literally in a straitjacket, and fear has got a hold of us. Why? Because now we're more focused on our career, we're more focused on making money, we're more focused on providing for a family, and then if we can't do those things, it's terrifying. We're not going to feel like we're enough, and so we get riddled with fear, because now if we take a risk, if we take a chance, what if I fail? What if I fail? And if you've heard some of my earlier podcasts, we link failure into I'm stupid, I'm inept, I'm inadequate, I'm dumb, and therefore I feel unworthy, I feel unlovable, I don't feel like I should even be breathing oxygen, I feel separate from everybody else, because look, I can't even succeed in this world. It's a very common thing that men go through, where when they were younger, they didn't have a lot of this fear, and now all of a sudden they have fear, and fear is preventing them from taking what I call inspired action, which we're going to get into in our next podcast. So the question that we were looking at today is, will fear stop you from not knowing what you're getting into? Like, how many guys, for example, want to start a new business, want to get out of their old career, want to do the thing that they're really passionate about, but they have this thing that's in the way. What do they call this thing? They call it fear. What's underneath that, and what stops a man from diving straight into the center of the fear, is he's terrified to fail. He's terrified to feel like he's not good enough. So fear has a tendency to take over our life, unless we can really encode ourselves. And this is what we do at Man on Fire, is we help guys really have breakthroughs inside of their body. You change your physiology, you change the certainty from the inside out rather than from the outside in, because you could read about fear, you go, oh, it's silly, fear is really just excitement, you just got to have this breakthrough, and we might understand certain things intellectually, but at the end of the day, we have to be able to experience within our body, well, what does it feel like to actually experience courage? What does it feel like to have fear, in front of you, but you face it anyway? You face everything and rise. What does it feel like to be at the edge of that plane, and then they tell you jump, and you're jumping out, and then you're worried, will the parachute open? Will it not open? But we're always a millimeter away as men from that feeling of being alive, from that feeling of having more passion, from that feeling of diving into uncertainty again. And there's part of us that keeps growing more and more and more conservative, more needing certainty, more needing control. And so fear can take a hold of our lives, and now all of a sudden maybe I'm fearful of getting married, maybe I'm fearful of starting that business, maybe I'm fearful of giving up this job that's provided a great living for me, but it's not really what I want to do. And so we have this thing in the way that's called fear. Well, just for a moment, I want you guys to take a look in your own life as to what has been your relationship to fear. Like, has the fear of not knowing what you're getting into stopped you? What's the main thing that you haven't done or gone forward in your life that fear has gotten a hold of you? Is it starting that new job? Is it starting your own company? Is it getting out of a relationship? Is it getting into a new relationship? For some of us, it could be the fear of reaching out to somebody that we haven't connected to for a long time. Maybe it's, I haven't connected to my dad, or to my mom, or to my brother, or to my sister, or to one of my friends. And there's this thing in the space, and it's called fear. Well, I don't know, because if I knew exactly how it was going to play out, then I would do it, right? So we want this certainty. We want the conviction of knowing, yeah, I would do it if I knew I wasn't going to fail. I would start that new business if I know I wasn't going to fail. And as we'll discuss in a future podcast, one of the things to consider is that part of facing fear is the fine line of letting go of that trapeze. It's the ability to replace fear with faith. What if fear is just a matter of faith? What if the person that's holding on to the trapeze and he's terrified to let go, and then he has to be in that gap, and then he has to be in the faith that another set of hands will catch him? What if fear is blocking you from having faith? What if fear is blocking you from having more trust and more faith? Faith in your ability, faith in your own soul, faith in a higher power, faith in you connecting to God. Fear is what gets in the way of us allowing faith to prevail in our life. And faith is of a different energy. Faith is of a different currency. Faith is of a different frequency, a different vibration, which brings us into a new version of ourselves. You see, the fear makes us not take risk. The fear keeps us from going into the bigness of who we are. Like, we're all, as you've heard in my previous podcasts, we're all these masculine leaders that are tremendous. We are extraordinary. We're phenomenal. We have standards that were set forth by our soul. We have God's love pouring through us, and we have this incredible ability. But then through certain life experiences and through certain stories and through certain limiting beliefs, we develop all of these fears, and next thing you know, we're not taking inspired action, empowered actions in our life, and we're a shell of who we really are. And we have gotten away from faith. When we were little kids, we had faith. We believed in everything. We believed in the power of our thoughts. Like, we were creators. We could dream so big and everything could manifest. That's the lens that we saw life through as little children. We had this magical way of seeing the world until certain fears were imposed upon us, whether it's by our parents, whether it's by the school system, whether it's by our friends, whether it's by the government, whatever it is. All of us are exposed to this fear, which is really, again, false evidence appearing real, or, F everything and run. And the invitation for you guys that are listening to this podcast is to get back to recognizing, first of all, fear is totally normal. Fear is related to a nervous system that has a little bit of vigilance in it, right? Because if you didn't have vigilance in your nervous system, if you felt free, if you felt open, if you felt aligned, if you didn't have all these past hurts and these past wounds and these past stories and these past traumas weighing you down, you wouldn't have any fear. Then you would just be experiencing life in present moment awareness. But we all have some degree of fear. We all have some stories that are locked in there of things that didn't work out, and then we formed solid stories about what we made it mean. And next thing you know, we're living our life in fear. And we're not taking chances. We're not going into variety, the spice of life. We're not diving into uncertainty, and we're trying to minimize and downsize our life, all for control. And what's control all about? As I just shared earlier, it's all about trying to avoid being hurt, trying to avoid feeling like you're not enough, unworthy, and unlovable. So my invitation for you guys is to put into the comment section, like, what is the thing that I've been fearing most? Or really just put, what does fear even mean to me? Like, don't necessarily put an acronym. Like, be really honest with yourself. So what does fear mean? And share a little bit about that in the comments. And then share, well, what are some things in my life that I know that I've let fear dictate, and because of it, I don't have this, or I could have had that. So meaning, like, I don't have a relationship with my father, or I could have had that new business, or I could have bought that piece of property that's now 10x in value. Like, what has fear prevented you from actually having or achieving in your life? And it's important that you take a look at that. And then the question I have for you is, what would it take for you to replace fear with courage? What would it take for you to replace fear with faith? That's the invitation that's in front of all of us as men, recognizing that ultimately the idea is not to eliminate fear, but it's to coexist with fear, and in spite of fear being there, to still be able to take inspired and empowered action. And I'll be the first and the last to always remind you that this is what you're made of. This is what you're built for, to have a higher standard, to live into a more full version of yourself, into a higher potential that you came here to be. And that is who you are, regardless if we have fear or not. This is the man that we're put on earth to live into. Guys, I love you so much. Please remember, together we rise, and I'll see you inside of the next podcast if you dare to show up for it. Much love, gentlemen. If you like what you're seeing and hearing, then hit that like button and subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so you'll know the next episode has dropped.